We were talking about the image. How many are familiar with this image from the book of Daniel? This was an image that Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, had, and then he called for all of the soothsayers, prophets, prophetesses, whatever, the wise men, to tell him what the dream was. Now Nebuchadnezzar, he was really smart, because if you had this dream, and then you went to the fortune teller or the soothsayer in the neighborhood, and you said, "Tell me the meaning of the dream," she or he would, the next response would be, "Well, tell me what the dream was." He wouldn't tell him what he dreamed. He said, "No." He said, "If God has given you the revelation, you can tell me what I dreamed." I mean, that is so awesome. I mean, could you imagine how many of these fortune tellers and stuff would be put out of business if you went there and said, no, don't tell me what you think it means. Tell me something else that there's no way you could know. Instead of, they make you feel good. They make you, I confess, I did have my palm read once. Get the demon off of there. But I did do it, And then I really felt bad about the whole thing. Because, hey, you know what? Just don't fool around with that stuff. They've got movies now. Breaker. You told me there's a guy, Baptist preacher, Breaker. Go ahead and tell him what this guy was talking about. The Ouija?
Oh, can Christians get demonized?
Yeah, that was a message, but
I zonked out before it completed.
Well, that's interesting. But the thing that he shared with me, there's an app that you get on your cell phone or iPad, and it's a Ouija. So you can contact the spirit world through this app. Oh my goodness. It's like, don't mess around with, this stuff is not funny. And these movies and stuff that they come out with, there's a Krampus. You see, Krampus is coming out now. I was going to explain to Laura what Krampus was, and she doesn't want to know nothing about it. But anyway, it's probably good you don't. But anyway, this, we're gonna talk about this. We're going to look at the scriptures as well. What the right before we read the scripture, what this represented is Nebuchadnezzar had this vision, and we'll see that Daniel's going to tell him, or not vision, but dream, that it was revealed to Nebuchadnezzar through this dream what was going to happen after his kingdom passed away. The kingdom that would follow, the kingdom that would follow, the kingdom that would follow. See, each one of these parts, there was a head of gold and a breast and arms of silver. There was a tummy or thighs of brass. Then there were these iron legs, and then there was feet, which was clay mixed with iron. And at the end of the dream, a rock came from heaven and smashed the image and at its feet, and the whole thing crumbled down. And the dream talked about, and Daniel said, it talked about the kingdom of God that was going to be set up upon the earth. You can look in your notes from last week. We talked about some interesting stuff also. If you've heard of the Club of Rome, you see we got that at the tail end about the end time meaning or possible meaning of these the 10 toes on this image right before the setting up of the millennial kingdom. And so that we don't know how far that will go, but that's what they want to do. They want to when I say they who control the governments of this world, there's an agenda. There's an agenda to unify it all and to put it under one leadership. And of course, we call it the kingdom of the Antichrist. But there's a lot in the making. So we talked a little bit about that, but we're continuing on talking about this image this week. But pick that up from your. You can look at a little bit on the end of the PowerPoint from last week, and you can see some of the things that we talked about. Go to YouTube, or I gave you the CD from the DVD from last week, and so you have that part 1 and 2. So And so here is Daniel telling Nebuchadnezzar what he saw. He said, "Thou, O king, sawest and beheld a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee. And the form thereof was terrible. And this image, his head was of fine gold, and his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron. His feet were part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces." You know, so this is the part I'm talking about, the stone here. And so you can see what we just read about that. Now, I blacked out the words that were on this image, so it wouldn't really give away what we're going to talk about yet, but so that's why it's black on this side. So we continue reading. Then was because Daniel's continuing to explain what Nebuchadnezzar the king actually dreamed. Now, nobody told Daniel, so it had to be supernatural, right? And right away, he got this far. If Daniel was just making it up, the king would have had him executed, right? I mean, this took a lot of faith. Think about, you're talking to a king. The king of Babylon, the greatest empire in the world at that time. And he asks you, "Can you tell me the interpretation of this dream?" And he says, yes, he can do it because he knows God. Can you imagine if he started just, thinking that he could do it? He wouldn't have never got this far. But anyway, he goes on. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold. Did you also notice that we just mentioned them in reverse? But you notice it started with clay or gold. What's more precious, gold or silver? So it started with gold, went to silver. Then what's more precious, silver or brass? Okay, so it's silver, and then you had brass, and you had iron. Iron is steel, right? That's not really that precious, right? And then you had clay mixed with the iron. Clay is dirt, right? And even the toes. How many toes were there, by the way? 10. Isn't that interesting? There's 10 toes and there's 10 horns on the beast. There's 10 toes on the image. And we know the book of Revelation, John said that there would be, in the last days with Antichrist, there would be these 10 kings. And this image tells of going from the time of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon all the way down to the end, right before Jesus comes, there will be these 10 toes. So, yeah, there's a correlation, yeah.
I thought it was interesting for the toe, the feet mixed with the clay and the iron. It symbolizing the government trying to strengthen the foundation for their government by having the iron to strength. But it doesn't matter how much strength you put with clay, like you say, it's dirt. It's not going to stand.
Exactly.
And when when Christ comes down and destroys the foundation, was never anything anyway.
And that's actually a good observation, because think about when that stone comes from heaven, where does it hit? It didn't hit him in the iron legs. Iron is strong. It hit him in that clay, mixed with clay. And it even says that the clay does not bond with the iron. But let's read on here. So then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold broken to pieces together. It became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. And we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. This is Daniel talking. We will tell you, but he's standing there talking to the king, telling him. He says, we. Who's the other person? God, right? What confidence! I mean, not only does he have this, he has the audacity to stand in front of this king, but he knows this is God. There's not one doubt in his mind that he's acting And he's standing, working by the power of the Holy Spirit working in him, and he's serving the one and only living God, right? He knows his God. Thou, O King. He's going to tell him the interpretation. Thou, O King, art a King of kings. For the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. I mean, he first tells him that, hey, you're a great king. But then he reminds him, you're not a great king because you're so great, but God gave you this kingdom. Right? Because really, Nebuchadnezzar didn't know. I mean, he really didn't know that God put him in charge. A lot of these, we already see when we went through some of these emperors, a lot of these emperors in Rome, right? A lot of these guys, they think they're God. I mean, literally. And so he says, God, the God of heaven, and not the gods that you serve, but the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven has he given into thine hand, has made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. He's not going to throw him in a fiery furnace for telling him that he's the head of gold, right? But it's just the meaning of the dream. But then he says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. This probably still sounds good to the king. Hey, I am the head of gold, and no matter what happens after me, it'll be inferior. I mean, what king wouldn't want to hear this, right? After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. Another picture of the image. So you can get this image in your head, because this is one of the most critical revelations to understanding all of Bible prophecy. Now think about this. You have churches that don't really teach on the Old Testament. And some of them may even get, or some of their members may get into trying to understand the book of Revelation. How can you understand the book of Revelation or any prophecy if you don't understand this one key point? Incidentally, what we're covering tonight, and I don't know how far we'll get, but what we are covering tonight is one of the most important things we've ever talked about here. And he's still talking. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. For as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. See, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. It's got to be Messiah, right? It's got to be the millennial kingdom, or the kingdom of God on earth. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand how long? Forever. Forever. And ever. And ever. I got a good concept of eternity for you. Maybe it's not so good. But somebody told me this one time. I thought it was good. So think about, these, what is that funny looking bird got the big old...
Pelican?
The pelican, yeah. So here's this pelican. Okay, and this pelican, he has some of, like a Superman ability. He can fly to the sun without getting hurt. Okay, so he begins on his journey. He comes to the earth, and he takes that pelican beak, and he takes 1 grain of sand from the earth, and he flies all the way to the sun, and he drops the grain of sand into the sun, and then he comes all the way back to the earth, and he takes another grain of sand. He flies all the way back to the sun. He does this over and over and over until he's taken every grain from the planet. In other words, planet doesn't exist anymore, right? Because he took every grain from the planet, threw it into the sun. That's one day in eternity. That's pretty good. I'm sure there's better ones, but the reason it's not perfect is I didn't come up with it. But, no, somebody told me, it's like, sometimes you just hear these things, and it just sticks with you. And I don't even know who was the one what said that, but it really, to me, that's a good illustration of forever. But he says, this kingdom will stand forever. Did you know, a lot of people don't understand this about Christianity, did you know there will be a kingdom on the earth forever? Most people will talk about, in Christianity, about going to heaven and living with Jesus forever. Well, that's cool, but Jesus is going to be down here. There's going to be the millennial kingdom, right? And which he'll rule, and we will rule and reign with him for 1,000 years. That's a millennium, is 1,000 years. And then after the millennium is a great white throne judgment, and there's a creation of a new earth and a new heavens, right? And the new Jerusalem, the city of gold in heaven, will come down and rest upon the earth. And God will dwell in that city on the earth. And the people who have access, who are God's people. In fact, he calls the city the bride. They live and dwell with him on the earth. Forever and ever and ever and ever. Now, he says he's going to recreate the earth. Now, I don't know if he's going to take this same earth and remake it. But I got an idea, maybe, he does say this one's going to be dissolved, right? So maybe there's another planet out there that he's got in mind. You ever compare like the Earth and Jupiter? There's a big difference between the Earth and Jupiter, right? There ain't nothing going on in Jupiter. Maybe that's where maybe he's going to call that one Earth. God can just shape that one up, right? Move it maybe out in a place where, you know what? It doesn't even need the sun. Come to think of it. It says God's going to be the light in the city. So, we gotta come out of our box here. We gotta open up our minds to the impossible. When God said he's going to make a new earth, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be right here. This is a huge city that's coming down. And people are going to live, we're going to be in heaven, but when you talk about heaven, isn't our solar system in the heaven? Isn't that heaven? I mean, it's not earth. God made the heaven and earth. So the solar system's heaven, right? Then there's the third heaven, where Paul was caught up to. We really don't know what life is going to be, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. All we know is it's going to be awesome. I know there's going to be some people, you can tell who it is. When the offering goes past, and they stick $1 in there and they take change? Yeah. These are the people that, bless their heart, they love God, they do love God, and they're going to be in heaven, but these guys are going to go out in the morning, and they're going to get down, and they're going to take something and try to scrape the gold off the road and stick it in their pocket. And it's all free, right? But you can tell because, that they just don't. There's one thing. There's people can be, very benevolent with their giving, right? And then you can be real stingy with your giving, right? But God still loves you. Anyway, so ever and ever and ever and ever the kingdom, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. Wow, it was cut out without hands. That means God did it. Right? If it was done without hands, God did it. and that it break in pieces the iron and the brass and the clay and the silver and the gold. In other words, everything that man has tried to build will come to naught. Think of what we just got through looking at, that Tower of Babel. The new Tower of Babel, which is located there in Mecca. I don't know how much you were able to hear from Pastor, speaking about it. This actually exists in Mecca, which is the holiest site of Islam. Islam's not like Christianity. Christianity, we go through life, we don't really have to do that much. We just accept Jesus Christ as Lord. For every Muslim, they have to once a year go to Mecca. Or not once a year, but once in their lifetime. It's mandatory, unless for some reason they're disabled or something. They can't get there. But if they can get there, they have to go. This is a great center of commerce. People come from all over the world to to worship there. And what a marvelous piece of architecture. It does really speak to the Tower of Babel. Even at the top, you saw the moon, the crescent moon was on top, just like at the Tower of Babel. So, where were we? The great God has made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. The dream is certain, the interpretation thereof sure. And now we put some little things together with the image. We have the head of gold. Actually, we know who it is because Daniel said, "This is you." Right? You are the head of gold. So we know he was the king of Babylon. We know Babylon's kingdom was from 606 to 538 BC. And there's another section of scripture in Daniel where these four beasts rise up and they're introduced to us as well. And they correspond. The first one, we have a lion with wings, actually, and we'll get into that, but it corresponds with this head of gold. The next one was the arms and the silver, Medo-Persia kingdom from 538 to 330 BC. We know that because Medo-Persia, even if you look in the Bible, it was Persia that took over Babylon, and there's a beast that'll rise up to equate to that. For the Medo-Persia, which is the bear. And then you have here the brass belly and thighs, which was Alexander the Great's kingdom of Greece from 330 to 160. And we had a corresponding beast. We haven't gotten into this beast yet, but it's a four-headed leopard with wings. And then we have the iron, which is actually, the legs of iron represent the Roman Empire from 160 BC to 476 AD. How many have heard of the fall of the Roman Empire? The Roman Empire fell, and then it came back in the form of a revived Roman Empire, and it was called the Holy Roman Empire. How many have heard of that? A Holy Roman Empire. And of course, the end of the statue, or the image says, the stone cut out of the mountain without hands will come and crush the feet here. So we have these beasts here: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Lion, bear, leopard, 10 horns. What does that sound like? Huh? The beast in Revelation. We never pointed this out so far. We've looked at the beast in different aspects. Remember we said they had 7 heads? There's 7 heads there. There's one on the lion. There's one on the bear. There's 4 on the leopard, and there's one on the final one. There's 7 heads. And it also it said it was like a lion. It was like a bear. It was like a leopard. Actually, it had the body of a leopard. It had feet of the bear. I even went as bold as to tell you that he walked around with bare feet. And he had the mouth of a lion. And then he had those 10 horns, right? Now, either I'm absolutely crazy or I'm right. Do you see a link here? I mean, if John was in our time and he was writing the book of Revelation, this would be a URL link. You would click on it and it would come to these beasts, right? And to this statue from the book of Revelation. I mean, that is how certain the connection is. Here's where he introduces these beasts. the image of that we just talked about, this is one of the first major concepts or keys to understanding prophecy. The second one are these beasts. And you notice I have imposed here, like there's a head right next to him, the head of gold. I don't want you to forget that there's a corresponding head of gold on that statue that looks like that beast. Incidentally, how many would be interested in coming into contact with that flying lion? How many would run? I think I would. But anyway, here's what he said. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision. See, this is a vision Daniel had just for him, for his understanding. He said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. I spoke about what is the great sea. The great sea was always the Mediterranean. Everything was happening around the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea. Also, there is some allusion when it talks about the sea, the sea and the great waves and everything. It can speak of multitudes of people symbolically. But typically, what it's saying is these beasts, when he saw them rise, every one of these beasts, the beasts in John's Revelation and these four beasts that Daniel saw, they all came out of the Mediterranean Sea, by the way. Anyway, he says there were four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Incidentally, did you know in the book of Revelation, in chapter 7, talks about four angels holding back the winds of heaven, and the command, don't injure the earth or anyone on the earth or the grass of the earth or whatever until we've sealed our servants in the forehead. Well, notice that there's a connection here. The four winds of heaven strove. This is connecting with the book of Revelation right there. So right there, that would be another link. And this is how the prophecy works. The Bible does interpret itself, which is good, because there's so many links back and forth to these different prophets. It kind of keeps us on track. Because we have the tendency to say, we can say almost anything. This means this means that. How are you going to know? The way you're going to know is the Bible needs to give us extra information so we're on the right path, right? I mean, I could stand here tonight and tell you that this lion represents Hillary. And you'd go, wow. But there's no scripture to say that lion represents Hillary, right? It might look like Hillary, but that's another thing. But no, I'm just funny. What did you say? The lion looked better? Well, at least it doesn't look as scary. I did see a newspaper in a store today at my lunch hour. They had one of these goofy newspapers had a picture of Hillary with these red like a jail suit. Yeah, they're in handcuffs behind bars. Said she's going to prison. So I don't know what the story there was. I didn't pick it up to look at it. But anyway, so the first was like a lion. And we also see that, like I said, the gold head there. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And we don't want to inject anything like, what does this mean right now? Let's be patient. Let's go through the scriptures and hope that God's going to reveal this in His own time to us. And, here you can see I've got the head of gold, I've got the lion, and here was the map of the Babylonian Empire. And what you're going to, I don't know how this map is not showing up that good, is it? But the interesting thing about all these kingdoms, remember I said these beasts rise up at the Mediterranean Sea, and you're going to see that there's an overlap of these kingdoms. It's almost like the one kingdom is swallowed up by the other kingdom, which is swallowed up by the next kingdom, which is swallowed up by the next kingdom. How many have heard that the final Antichrist is going to rise up in the old revived Roman Empire. I mean, that's been taught for years and years and years, right? There's much reason for that. In other words, it's not going to rise up in China. There's nothing in the Bible that says, and that that head of Korea or something is going to be the Antichrist, right?
But it does say he's going to be a dragon.
What did you say?
I said it does say he's going to be a dragon.
Oh yeah, and that could be China. Yeah. But this Babylonian kingdom, and this lion here. Okay, so the initial response and the initial meaning is that it represents the kingdom of Babylon. And here you see the silver part of the statue there with the arms, and the bear representing the Medo-Persian kingdom. And it says, and behold, another beast. Now, again, this is not revealed to the king. It's revealed to Daniel. He saw these dreams. Beheld another beast, a second like to a bear. It raised up itself on one side. The reason is it represents Medo-Persia. There were two kings. They were together in league or covenant. And one, usually like your right arm stronger than your left arm, or your left arm stronger than your right arm, right? Well, there's nothing different about this image. It had two arms, but one was stronger. Okay, and it says the bear was lifted up on one side. All it means is that one of the kingdoms was greater in power than the other, but they were in covenant together. And they were two. It's the Median Empire and the Persian Empire. They combined together to form the Medo-Persia. Also, there were 3 ribs in its mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise and devour much flesh. So, obviously, this bear is going to take over the lion. So if I'm going to run somewhere, I think I'll run in the path of the lion, because the bear is going to kill the lion here. But the 3 ribs in its mouth, if this represents the Medo-Persian Empire, there were 3 kingdoms that were basically taken down by the Medo-Persian Empire, besides just the land, the empire that it took over. And one was Lydia, one was Babylon, and one was Egypt. And that's what's almost all commentators will tell you, that those were the most obvious ribs in the mouth of the bear. And here is the Persian Empire, and if you can see that it's basically overlapping the same. In fact, what's located right here? This is Euphrates River. This was where the Babylon was. And so you can see Turkey's up here. Remember, we talked about the 7 churches. So the area of the 7 churches is right up here. And so you can get some idea here. But the Persian Empire is Iran. Okay, today we call it Iran. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads. Dominion was given to it. Now we know this is Alexander the Great's kingdom. It's interesting that Alexander the Great, as great as he was, doesn't stand out in this image. What stands out is that there's 4 heads associated with this beast. And the reality is that after Alexander the Great conquered basically the whole known world in just a few years. In fact, how old was he? I think was he only 24 years old or something, where he conquered the whole earth. And then he actually sat down. Historians say he sat down and cried because there was no more places to conquer. And he was so depressed, he drank himself into alcoholism, and I think he ended up dying of that. He couldn't get a liver transplant because he didn't work or live in our day. But the 4 heads are significant because when he passed away, he didn't really have an heir. Usually a king, passes away and his son takes over, right? And it could even be the daughter. It could be not a queen's on the throne. The kingdom was taken over by his 4 generals. So it was split up into 4, and we'll see that later on because we can't get into everything at one time. But that's why there's 4 heads on the beast. And notice dominion was given to it. And if if anybody ruled, I mean, this Alexander, no, maybe he was 34 years old. I don't know. Somebody could, because I'm thinking that he was about 34 years old, because I think there was a connection between like how old he was and how old Jesus was, but I don't believe I have it in my notes. And here's the Grecian Empire. And you can see it's the same land again, right? So you had the Babylonian Empire, which was taken over the Medo-Persian Empire, which was then taken over by the Grecian Empire. What will follow? All we have to do is look at the image, because Daniel told us. After this I saw in the night, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong, exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had, how many horns? It had 10 horns. Right? Okay, so that's the next beast. You notice all of how descriptive this is. First of all, you remember the iron legs. Well, you can see the iron with this beast because he had iron teeth. When I was in the Air Force, I worked in a veterinary clinic, and they were capping the guard dog's teeth with stainless steel caps. So when in the night, when the guard dogs would smile or open their mouth or whatever, the light, wherever the light was, would actually reflect from these canine teeth. They were stainless steel. It's pretty cool, actually. But, what's the question? You got the answer?
Alexander the Great was 13 when he became the king, and he fought for 15 years in battle and never lost a single battle, and he died at 32.
33. And how old was Jesus? Okay, 32. So he was a little younger than Jesus. Didn't die the same way. All right, so he's got great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces. Break is just a simple word, has the same meaning as broke. He broke in pieces. He stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse. The meaning is different. He was different from all the beasts that went before it. In other words, there's something about this beast. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, so we saw the iron in the legs. We see the 10 horns on this beast. We saw 10 toes on the image. But we haven't gotten to the feet yet, right? So that's kind of interesting. Almost seems like it's out of sync, but it just seems that way. And, of course, this was the Roman Empire. And everybody knows that the Roman Empire swallowed up the Greek Empire. In fact, if you remember, who were the tutors throughout the Roman Empire? All the tutors that they had, the slaves that taught in all their family. The rich people, they had tutors that taught their children. And who were the tutors? They were Greeks. Greeks were much more educated. And all throughout the kingdom, they also didn't really have much of a religious system. Their idea of religion was whatever the Greeks had, they just gave them Latin names. They gave them Roman names. So all the Roman gods are the same as the Greek gods. What'd you say?
Don't forget the Egyptians.
Don't forget there's definitely an Egyptian link, yes. Because the Greek gods actually came from the Egyptian gods. And the Egyptian gods actually came from Babylon. And at some point in time, I hope in the near future, we'll be getting into Babylon the Great. Right? Okay, so what facts does the Bible say which will distinguish the Antichrist kingdom? It would be good to know, wouldn't it? If Daniel is a key to understanding biblical prophecy, it would be good to know, does Daniel give us any facts that would be good to know for us to identify and distinguish this Antichrist kingdom as we try to understand or comprehend the book of Revelation? Now we know that it's already significant because we went from Babylon to Rome in what was the empire in the days of Jesus? Rome, right? So we know we're right on target. It's not like we took a right turn somewhere and ended up in Smallville. That was just for you. Smallville, that was just for you. She writes papers about superheroes. Or maybe paper. But anyway. And so, this is actually a picture of John's image, because we're looking in Revelation chapter 17, verse 8. The beast that thou sawest. So we're jumping back to the New Testament. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. What will be the attitude or the general reaction to the people who are existing in the time of the end, where the Antichrist kingdom rises up in its full power? What would be the general attitude? The response, it's right there. Shock and awe, that's good. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder. They'll be saying, oh, I wonder, wonder who. Okay, so what we got from that, though, we got a piece of information. It's got to be a worldwide power of some sort, right? In other words, it's not going to be the kingdom of Madagascar. Right? Good night. It's only 9 o'clock, right? Okay. It says 10 o'clock. You're trying to crimp my style here. So it's a worldwide power. And we read from Revelation chapter 13, verse 4. And all, how many?
All.
How many is all?
All.
Is it more than a lot?
It's all.
All, okay. All that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Tells us a lot here. When was Jesus slain? Who was slain? Jesus was slain, right? He's the Lamb.
Foundation of the world.
From the foundation of the world. In other words, it wasn't like God got to the point in 33 AD and said, man, everything I've tried to do has gone wrong. I got to come up with a plan of salvation. Oh, maybe if I kill my son. No, that's not what. Slain from the foundation. In other words, you know, foundation of the foundation of the world means before Adam and Eve were put on it. So it kind of answers the question when people say, oh, if God knew what was going to happen, why didn't he put that snake in the garden? Why did he, he knew man was going to sin. You'd say he knew man was going to sin. I don't think he knew God was. God knew what was going to happen, but he had to let it run its course. Right? Just because rotten things happen in this world doesn't mean God doesn't care about it. He's fixing it. It just takes time. But I think this is interesting. When was the Lamb slain? Where did God have this idea? From the foundation of the world. By the way, who's the creator? Who? God? Yeah. But it also says Jesus is actually the creator of this universe that exists. So he was there in the beginning, at the foundation of the world. He was there, and he created a universe in which the plan was to kill him. He was always in agreement with the plan. He knew from the time he made Adam and Eve, he knew before that Adam was going to fail him, that Eve was going to fail him. He knew the serpent was going to sneak in the garden and beguile him. He knew everything. He knew, and he knew what he was going to do and when he was going to do it. Right? Jesus came, he was born at the right time. Did you know, just like he knew all that, he knew you'd be sitting here tonight? Right? He knew what you'd be thinking about. I don't know what you're thinking about. You're probably thinking, I wonder when we get to go home. No. Okay, so from the foundation of the world, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? What's coming out in this passage? What are they doing to the beast? Huh? They're doing what?
Glorifying.
They're glorifying him. What's another word because with a W? They're worshiping him, right? So he must be not only a world power, he's got to be some sort of religious beast. You don't just, if you worship something, it's religion. They even say atheism is a religion because they're worshiping their own philosophy. Even though they say there's no deity, but they still worship. It's still a religion. It's what they believe. They're worshiping their own thing, right? This is some type of, and remember we read the scripture when Daniel told, he said, this last beast, this fourth beast, it was different than all the rest of them. And here's where it was different. The other one were earthly empires. This earthly empire rose up. There's this fourth beast. And in John's day, it's this beast that he talks about with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. This somehow turns into some religious beast that receives worship. And of course, we know ultimately what happens. He causes everybody to get a mark in their hand or their head, right? And he who does not do that will have their head cut off or whatever. And if you do it, then God will throw you in the lake of fire. And so we're back here with Daniel. He says, after this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, had great iron teeth that devoured and brake in pieces, stamped the residue with the feet of it. It was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. We saw the Roman Empire. Did we see we saw that already, right? We got the picture of the beast here. I thought we already saw the Roman Empire. And just to remind you, it has to do with these sexy legs here, right? On this image. These legs of iron. Okay. How many legs did you see on the image? 2, right? Very easy. God made it. This has to be God. Who else could take a picture of all the empires leading from the time of Babylon all the way to the end of the setting up of the millennial kingdom and make it so easy to understand? It had 2 legs. It started out at the same place. It was iron up here, brass here, but it was iron here. And then all of a sudden split into 2, right? Did you know, as we're talking about Pergamus, the name Pergamus, by the way, who remembers Pergamus, what it means? Anybody? What? Marriage. It's actually 2 words. The gammus part is marriage. You get words like monogamy, bigamy, right? You can see that the gammy part is marriage. The per part is mixed marriage, is what it means. It's a mixed marriage. It's, okay, do you want to do it? And it's something that probably should never have happened. God is opposed to this mixed marriage, if you will. But anyway, this map here, it's amazing. Because I don't think anybody told Constantine about this. We mentioned Constantine last week. So we're kind of where we left off from last week, but we had to fill in all these things that come from the book of Daniel, because we're getting into all this stuff, and we have to see why was the beast like a lion? Why was he like a leopard? Why was he like a bear? Constantine was the emperor of Rome, right? And Constantine decided, how many hills, by the way, how many hills was the city of Rome built on? 7 hills. Constantine chose a place where there were another 7 hills where he could build a second Rome, because he was going to divide his kingdom. He came to the conclusion, if he was going to rule this empire, the empire was so large that he needed help. And so he set up another throne in Constantinople. I don't know if you can read that here. Today it's called Istanbul. It's in Turkey. Remember I mentioned Turkey before. I said, how relevant is Turkey in Bible prophecy? It's really relevant, right? In fact, those 7 churches were all located in Turkey, right? So Constantine actually moved his throne over to Constantinople, and he appointed the Bishop of Rome to be kind of like his cohort in ruling the empire. Now, before that, the Bishop of Rome was the Bishop of Rome. He didn't really have any special privilege of any other bishop. He wanted to, but Constantine actually divided the empire himself. And so we see the two legs forming. There's actually, when you talk about, and historically, when you talk about the Roman Empire, you talk about the East and the West. It actually did divide into two different empires. And we see those legs again, but so we have these two legs, which Daniel tells us, but now we have another revelation. John's given us another injection of the meaning of the prophecy. What's going to happen next? This beast, the second beast, rises up. Remember how many horns did he have? And we said horns represent kings, right? Or kingdoms. You see this second Rome, or this second beast, bears two horns on his head, which actually represents the dividing of this power, this Roman kingdom. Remember, we talked about this, actually we've mentioned it, I think, the last few times, but where did the beast get his power? The dragon. What were you going to say?
The throne.
From the throne. Well, Pergamus is where the seat of Satan is, right? Yeah. But yeah, we showed that one. In fact, we showed that one picture where it's like, I like it because it's like the dragon is going like zap. And he like zaps this image of this beast. And if you look at it close, there's like this energy field around the beast. The artist just captured it. But it's amazing that here's these two horns on this beast. It really shows us the division, right? And remember, it's not the first beast that was really the religious beast so much. I mean, they had their imperial worship of the emperors, but when this second beast comes along, he had all the power of the first beast. When Constantine moved his throne to Constantinople, it was an interesting name, by the way. Where did you think he ever came up with a name like Constantinople? Constantine, right? Yeah, Constantinople. That'd be like you would call your kingdom the John.
Yes. Throne.
The throne. Yes, I love that. Oh, so here we have this introduction of this beast. And behold, another beast coming up out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb. But remember, you can always identify him. He's not a lamb. He spoke like the dragon. And the dragon is the one who gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now, we spoke about this. I actually are going to read something to you about this. But this is Constantine, actually, when he becomes the emperor. Now, nobody saw this. Nobody else saw this in the sky. But he claims it happened. So all we know is he said it happened. Now, I will tell you this about Constantine. From what I understand, his father really had become a Christian. And he told Constantine that God blessed him because he blessed the Christian God. I'm not so sure that Constantine ever did become a Christian. He claimed that he did. But I think that he saw Christianity as a way to rule over the kingdom and to unite the kingdom. And by the way, he didn't make Christianity the world or the religion of the Roman Empire. But what he did is he helped it along, if you will. He started giving a lot of benefits and promoting Christianity. But supposedly he saw this image in the sky, this apparition. Now, one of the things that I've been taught, and I would say this is by the Spirit, is don't believe just because your eyes see it. So even if he really did see this apparition, that doesn't mean nothing in my book. as we continue going, living through this earth and on these last days, there's going to be all kinds of weird things happening. How many heard of that Shroud of Turin? Shroud of Turin is very famous. Catholicism is supposed to be the burial cloth that covered up Christ. When Christ rose from the dead, it left this negative imprint, the energy. When he actually rose, this energy came out of it. This is the theory. Energy came out of his body and left this imprint, which was completely transparent to someone who would see it. It just looked like it was scorched. And it wasn't discovered until many years later. Somebody took a photograph of it. They were developing in their, when they still had the dark room. And he looked, and he could see there was a negative. The actual photograph was like a negative. Or he could see this imprint, this image of Jesus on the negative. That's what it was. He took the picture, and you couldn't really tell from the picture, but when he went to develop it, he developed the negative, and there was this image of, supposedly this image of Christ, which was caused by the energy leaving or emitting from Christ's body. Now, I don't know if it's authentic or not. All I know is that a whole bunch of scientists have investigated it. Some still think it was a fraud, but they can't explain to this day how it was done. And they didn't have any of this knowledge and any technology and any know-how to make this thing. And it still amazes the world. But ever since I heard about this thing, and I saw this one video on it, and they actually took by way of computer, they took this image from this cloth, and they through some program they made it into a 3D image. And from that 3D image, they have a blueprint. They would say they know exactly what Jesus looked like, and they could use that as a map or a blueprint to make an image of that which they think actually represents what Jesus looked like. Now, is there possibly a group of people in the world that would love to bow down to an image like that of what Jesus really looked like? The other thing is, if it's authentic, there's blood. Jesus' blood is on his wrist, and he's on his brow, and he's got these wounds all in the right place. And if you watch any television at all about the police force, you know about forensics, and you know that today you can take blood. And from that blood, you can get the DNA. And from the DNA, you could actually put that DNA into another cell, and you could mass produce that. And we've come so close, we've actually cloned animals. Nobody knows if an actual human being has ever been cloned. But right away, I had this idea. Now, I'm not saying it's from God. I'm just saying, beware. It's quite possible from this cloth, they could clone the body of Christ.
But it wouldn't have a soul.
Oh, but didn't I read somewhere where something jumps into the Antichrist about 3.5 years later?
But I mean, it would have to have something in it to get up and motivate, brain power to do anything, from infant on up. But
did you ever see those cartoons where there's like this body and there's like a little guy driving it inside the... What about Iron Man? Iron Man could run that thing, right?
The wires,
yeah. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying beware, right? Beware. Yeah.
Maybe this is the Jesus that says that he's not the son. He's not really the Son of God.
Yeah, because Muslim prophecy says that the Mahdi, when he comes, which is as far as our book is concerned, he really seems to answer to the Antichrist. But he says that the Muslims say that Jesus is going to come right next to him and say that he's not the Son of God, just like you said. So maybe that's where he'll come from. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out. It's just a thought. Let the thought go and come. And, it's like we all have thoughts. It doesn't mean anything. But this apparition happened supposedly. And so Eusebius, we talked about Eusebius. Eusebius was a church historian. He wrote 10 famous volumes of church history. And so he wrote this about this life of Constantine. He says, Eusebius gives us historical account of the famous vision which the emperor saw, which was destined to change the history of the church forever. This vision is followed up by a visitation of Christ himself and a vivid description of the sacred labarum, or standard of Constantine. Now this is quote right from him. Accordingly, he called on him with earnest prayer and supplications that he would reveal to him who he was and stretch forth his right hand to help him in the present difficulties. This is Constantine, right? He wants to rule the empire with God's help. And while he was thus praying with fervent entreaty, a most marvelous sign appeared to him from heaven, the account of which it might have been hard to believe had it been related by any other person. So what Eusebius is saying is, anybody else told me this, I wouldn't believe it, but the emperor himself saw this, and I know the emperor wouldn't be lying about this, because he's a Christian. But since the victorious emperor himself, long afterward, declared it to the writer of this history when he was honored with his acquaintance and society, and confirmed his statement by an oath, who could hesitate to accredit the relation, especially since the testimony of after time has established its truth? He said that about noon, when the day was already beginning to decline, he saw with his own eyes the trophy of a cross of light in the heavens above the sun, bearing the inscription, "Conquer by this." At this sight he himself was struck with amazement, his whole army also, which followed him on the expedition, and witnessed the miracle. This actually... he says the army witnessed the miracle, but how did they witness it? It reminds me of, when Apostle Paul was struck blind with the image of light, and God actually spoke to him, but nobody really heard it or saw anything. Only Paul did. So you had to take his word for it, right? So something very similar had to happen to Constantine, according to what Constantine said. Well, did it really happen? I don't know. You got to either believe Constantine or not. And so he said, moreover, that Constantine said this: he himself doubted within himself what the import of the apparition could be. So he didn't even know. And while he continued to ponder and reason on its meaning, night suddenly came on. Then in his sleep, Christ of God appeared to him with the same sign which he had seen in the heavens, and commanded him to make a likeness of the sign, or that sign which he had in the heavens, and use it as a safeguard in all his engagements with the enemy. This might sound pretty awesome, and maybe it did happen the way it's being described, but I'm reminded, when I read this and I think about this, I'm reminded of some other apparition who brought another sign, the sign of the rosary, and said to pray like this, and that she would bring salvation to the whole world if they would say her rosary. And so people, millions and billions, over 1 billion people are taught to pray. Now, I don't know how many of them actually pray the rosary, but I think there's a lot of them that do, a big number, large number. Anyway, so you can't believe it just even if it happened, you can't believe that it was really of God, right? Especially when it says, and then Christ himself revealed himself. So at dawn of day, he arose and communicated this marvel to his friends. I think the proof is in the pudding, actually, as well. And when you see that the prophecy puts the label Pergamus, which is a mixed marriage, which means Constantine is marrying the church to the world, and you see what follows afterwards, I think it kind of diminishes this great miracle he said happened. But anyway, at dawn of day he arose and communicated the marvel to his friends, and then calling together the workers in gold and precious stones, he sat in the midst of them and described to them the figure of the sign he had seen, bidding them to represent it in gold and precious stones. And this representation I myself have had an opportunity of seeing. So now he began to make images of this thing. And I have a problem with that, because the Bible tells us not to make any graven image of anything. Don't bow down Don't worship it. In fact, you remember that brazen serpent in the Old Testament? Moses held up the brazen serpent, and then people were healed. And then Jesus referred to it. He said, just like Moses lifted up that brazen serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. The serpent actually represented sin being nailed to his cross, right? Because Jesus became sin on that cross. But what happened to those Israelites later on? They began to worship that goofy thing. And finally, King Hezekiah, who was a good king, by the way, he wanted to stamp out idolatry, and he crushed that thing. He said he's not having his people worship that. And it was the right thing to do. Nowhere did a prophet come and say, oh, you did that to God's sacred serpent? And nowhere does God tell us to bow down to any images. So I don't think God told him to make this image. Even if he saw something, who says it was God? Right? Now it was made in the following manner. He had a long spear overlaid with gold, formed the figure of the cross by means of a transverse bar laid over it. On the top of the whole was fixed a wreath of gold, precious stones, and within this the symbol of the Savior's name, 2 letters indicating the name Christ. By means of the initial characters, the letter, which looks like an English P, that's actually called a rho. It has a R sound, but a letter P being intersected by an X, and in the which is a ka in Greek, and so it was a P being intersected by an X in its center, and these letters, the emperor was in the habit of wearing on his helmet at a later period. It looks like he's almost superstitious about this thing. From the crossbar of the spear was suspended a cloth, a royal piece, covered with the profuse embroidery of most brilliant precious stones, in which, being also richly interlaced with gold, presented as an indescribable degree of beauty to the beholder. This banner was of a square form, and the upright staff, whose lower section was of great length, bore a golden half-length portrait of the pious emperor and his children on its upper part, beneath the trophy of the cross and immediately above the embroidered banner. The emperor constantly made use of this sign of salvation as a safeguard against any adversary or adverse and hostile power, and commanded that others similar to it should be carried by the head of all his armies. And how many have supposedly, he minted coins, so this is the sign that eventually came out of it. Now, when you see that sign, how many would associate that with Christianity? You can see where that sign came from, right?
It's on the cookie.
It wasn't. What was it?
It's on the cookie, too.
It's on the cookie. What cookie? That death cookie? Yeah. Where did Jesus, in the time he was on earth, where did he tell us to do things according to that sign? In fact, it's not introduced all these years until over 300, almost 300 years to the letter after Jesus left the earth. A little shy of 300 years. Then all of a sudden, Jesus says, start using this sign as to ward off enemies. Constantine says, all of my military, my leader, they're all going to carry this in the battle. Doesn't that sound like superstition? To me, that doesn't sound like God, but it sure does seem to introduce the church into idolatry. And so this is what we see. This is the very beginning of it. It gets worse next church. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It gets worse and worse, but we're not talking about next church. But this is the beginning of it. And you can actually see this all over the church here. And let me see. Where's a good ending place? This would probably be just as good to end here. You know what? Let me read this one last slide, and then we'll go ahead and call it quits for tonight. I'm sorry I can't complete everything in one sitting. It's just too much. You can't do more than you can do in one setting. But So we have this, okay, so yeah, so did Constantine actually become a Christian? Now, if you ask people out there, most people will say he was a Christian. Just look at what he did. But, if I was talking to you, which I am, I would ask you the question, was he a Christian? Let's look at what he did. As Emperor of Rome, we know absolutely that he continued to honor the unconquered sun god. He continued to worship the sun god, which was the pagan god of Rome, right? We know that that's a fact. He worshiped the sun god as well as other pagan deities of Rome. Now, he didn't worship the Roman emperors. In fact, he kind of put that imperial Roman emperor worship away. He said that was wrong. That was idolatry. But he himself continued to worship God. It sounds to me, even if he wanted to be a Christian, it sounds like he wasn't so sure. So he was like hedging his bets, right? It's like going to church and believing in salvation, but keeping a rosary real close by. So you could pray that, asking Jesus to forgive you, but then going to confession just in case. And make it even a little better, or to get the picture here. So I become a Christian, but I'll still go ahead and worship all those Hindu gods, because you don't know, maybe Vishnu's the one. And I'll tell you what, if you're worshiping Jesus and it turns out to be Vishnu, you're going to be in trouble. But it's not, right? But if you're a doubter, and you see, at least I seem to pick up on it. I don't know if you do. I seem to see a lot of people in Christianity that they kind of seem like they're not all the way in. They're hanging on to some other things just in case, because they're not really totally sure that Christ is enough. And so we know these are facts. He continued to worship the sun god. He continued to worship other pagan deities. Number two, Constantine never established Christianity as the state religion. Now, it did happen a couple emperors after him that it finally became the state religion. But it would appear that he favored the religion for political reasons alone. Remember, Constantine, one of the things he did was he stopped the persecution of Christians. He made it absolutely against the law to persecute the Christians for not worshiping the Roman gods. So that was he did some good things here. But remember, Constantine has to rule over an empire. He's got Christianity, which keeps growing, and then he has various different sects of the sun god. And so then Constantine handed the imperial scepter over to the Bishop of Rome. This is the beginning of what? Catholicism, right? The bishop became his pawn to assist him in ruling over the empire, giving him complete authority to handle any disputes through the Christian world during his reign. And then Constantine retained the title as emperor over religions, which title was Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of religions, which would eventually be transferred to the Pope of Rome.